Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, chill thermal ages, welcome to Robert Sports Show. I'm your host, Robert. Alright, the NFL season's over with, college football's over with, we have Super Bowl champion, we have national champion in football, the NCAA March Madness isn't here yet, WWE Wrestling sucks right now, Major League Baseball isn't here yet, so we're going a little different here on Robert Sports Show. We're going to talk about NASCAR. I know there's probably a lot of fans out there that aren't fans of NASCAR, but I know there's a lot of die-hard NASCAR fans out there. Wouldn't say I'm a die-hard NASCAR fan, but I am a NASCAR fan. I always have been. So what I'm going to run down this first video here is going to be kind of NASCAR history, kind of how NASCAR got started, some records and things about NASCAR, and then it's going to lead into a my top 7 favorite NASCAR drivers of all time, and then my top 7 favorite Daytona 500 moments of all time. If you are a NASCAR fan, you know Saturday night is the Busch Clash / Bud Shootout / Sprint Unlimited. Kind of changed names over the years. Saturday night under the lights of Daytona. Sunday is Daytona 500 qualifying. Next Thursday is the Gatorade Duel qualifying races for the 500. The duels are on Thursday, so look for Friday, and early in the Saturday, look for the preview for the Daytona 500, and then the Monday after, or even the evening after the 500, look for a review of the Daytona 500. So we're going to get down to, if you're not a NASCAR fan, some history. Maybe if you are a NASCAR fan, you either didn't know this or you already knew this. So, a little NASCAR history here. NASCAR stands for the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing. Stock car racing dates back to 1903 on the sands of the Daytona Beach. During the 20s and 30s, a lot of these guys had hopped up cars. They would, run bootlegging during Prohibition. They were bootleggers. They would run moonshine out of the hills of the Appalachian Mountains through, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And they'd run from the revenuers. They had to have these fast cars to get away from the revenuers, which was basically the police. When Prohibition ended in 1933, these guys were still running moonshine. And now the revenues were after them because they wanted to pay taxes, charge taxes on them. So the cars kept getting faster and faster, And like I said, dating back to 1903, a lot of these guys that ran this moonshine, they would take their cars down to the sands of Daytona Beach and race, and then drive home. A guy named Bill France Sr., who actually raced in these races on the beach at Daytona, he actually finished 5th in 1936. In 1938, he took over running this event, and through, for the next 8 years of setting up these races on the beach and doing all this and being a race promoter, he decided, hey, why don't we get all the promoters in the area together, anybody that promotes a stock car race, and let's create a sanctioning body that can run it. Have somebody that runs it, have inspections and all this. So on December 14, 1947, at the Ebony Bar in the Streamline Hotel in Daytona Beach, Bill France Sr., along with other race promoters, sat down and started hammering out the foundation for what we call NASCAR today. The idea started, it took 2 months, and on February 21st, 1948, NASCAR was officially born at the Ebony Bar, the Streamline Hotel in Daytona Beach. NASCAR's very first sanctioned race was June 19th, 1949 in Charlotte, North Carolina. As ironic as that is, it's the Charlotte Speedway then is not anywhere associated to the current Charlotte Speedway, but the fact that Charlotte was the first race of NASCAR, Charlotte is the home of the vast majority of the race teams are in the Charlotte area. Charlotte, North Carolina is the home base for a lot of NASCAR teams. A guy named by the name of Jim Roper won the very first NASCAR sanctioned race. The first champion that year was a guy named Red Byron. That first year it was called NASCAR Strictly Stock. A lot of these teams these race cars, people would drive them in and drive them home. Families would load up in the car, drive to the racetrack, race the car, and drive home. You would have people renting cars just to drive and race them. In 1950, NASCAR kind of renamed a year later the NASCAR Grand National Division, which is what it was called from 1950 to 1970. In 1971, the modern era, what we refer to as the modern era of NASCAR, was created. Which actually started in 1972 when R.J. Reynolds Tobacco and the Winston brand came in and was the first title sponsor for NASCAR, and renamed it the NASCAR Winston Cup Series. That went from 1971 to 2003. Obviously, late 90s, early 2000s, with the whole thing with tobacco and smoking. There was a ban put on smoking and tobacco actually sponsoring events, so Winston had to pull their sponsorship. Not only did they pull their sponsorship from the title sponsor of NASCAR, but they had to pull it from the cars they sponsored, from the track. So the cigarette brands had to go away. So Nextel phone service stepped up in 2004, and Nextel was the title sponsor of the Nextel Cup Series. And then in late 2007, when Sprint bought Nextel, beginning in 2008, it was referred to as the Sprint Cup Series, which, as we all know, at the end of the 2016 season, Sprint will be leaving NASCAR as a title sponsor. Obviously, as popular as NASCAR is and how big the sport has grown throughout the 65-year history, another big company will step in and be the title sponsor for the 2017 season. But as we all know, Sprint is leaving at the end of 2016. The Nextel Sprint Cup Chase era began in 2004. Prior to 2004, there wasn't a playoff format. Basically, they ran 36 races. Whoever had the most points won. Obviously, in 2004, when the chase started, they had 12 people in the chase, 10. They've kind of modified the chase over time. The current chase format, which debuted in 2014, you had 16 drivers make the chase. After 3 races, you eliminated 4. And you got down to the final 4 at the last race of the year. As a fan of the way NASCAR was before the chase, never been a huge fan of the chase. When they first announced this knockout version of the chase, I could not stand it. I thought it was the stupidest thing in the world. I hated it. After watching it unfold and seeing the drama from that last race, realizing of the 4 people that were running for the chase, Denny Hamlin, Joe Logano, Ryan Newman, Kevin Harvick, realizing whoever was the highest finisher was the champion. I hated it until I watched the race. Until during that race, watching Kevin Harvick win his first championship, I realized this brings dramatic to it. This is very dramatic. So, still not completely in love with the chase format, but hey, I guess it's better than having, like in, I believe it was 1994, Dale Earnhardt winning the championship with 2 races left in the season. I guess it's better than having that, or some other things that happened over NASCAR throughout the years. NASCAR has been around 65 years. During that 65-year history, there's been 30 different champions. There's been 2,884 different drivers. So 2,884 drivers have raced in 2,426 NASCAR Winston Cup races. So in 65 years, we've had 30 different champions. Of those champions, we've had 15 multiple-time champions in 65 years, led by Richard Petty, 7-time champion, Dale Earnhardt, another 7-time champion, Jimmy Johnson, a 6-time champion, and Jeff Gordon, a 4-time champion. I believe there's 4 people with 3 championships. Of the 2,426 races that have been ran in the 65-year NASCAR history, there have been 184 different winners. The all-time win list, with 200 victories, we have Richard Petty, the famous number 43. Second, at 105 wins, we have David Pearson, the Silver Fox, who drove the number 11 car, the number 21 car for the Wood Brothers. We have third all-time at 92 wins, we have Jeff Gordon in the 24 DuPont car. At 84 wins, we have a tie. We have Darrell Waltrip. Jaws, as they called him back in the 70s. He drove the number 11 car. He drove the 17 car. He drove quite a few different cars throughout his career. And we also have, with 84 wins, Bobby Allison, the leader of the Alabama gang. And 83 wins, we have Cale Yarborough, who drove the 28 Hardee's cars, the last car he drove. He drove the 11 Holly Farms car for Junior Johnson. These are the top 6 drivers in career wins in NASCAR. The one thing that these guys have done is align themselves with quality teams who were able to put a great car under so they can win. You know, Richard Petty drove for Petty Enterprises, I think his entire career, maybe a few races here and there he drove for somebody else. Petty Enterprises is one of the all-time greatest race teams ever. Unfortunately, they are no longer around. David Pearson, he drove for the famous Wood Brothers. He drove for, what else did he drive for? Holman Moody, which was back in the day, was one of the top teams. You know, Jeff Gordon has always drove for Rick Hendrick Motorsports. Bobby Allison drove for the Spoll Brothers, drove for himself, Bobby Allison Racing. He drove for Holman Moody. Darrell Waltrip drove for himself toward the end of his career. He drove for Rick Hendrick for a while. He drove for Junior Johnson, one of the top teams in the 80s. Cale Yarborough, you know, he drove for himself, and he drove for he drove for Junior Johnson at one point in his career. Like I said, 184 different winners in NASCAR history. There's only been 12 drivers to ever win 50 or more races. There's only been the 2 that's ever won 100 or more races. NASCAR opened their Hall of Fame May 11, 2010 in Charlotte, North Carolina. The first Hall of Fame class for NASCAR was the late Dale Earnhardt, Bill France Sr., Bill France Jr., Junior Johnson, and Richard Petty. Obviously, those names throughout NASCAR history are very symbolic. NASCAR is big, family-oriented. If you look at the fans are very loyal to their drivers, and that's not more relevant than it is with the number 3, the late Dale Earnhardt. When Dale Earnhardt was killed in an accident in 2001 at the Daytona 500, Richard Childress, his car owner at the time, obviously did not want the 3 back on the track. Fans begged for it to come back. He changed the car from black to white, went from 23 to 29. Recently, in 2014, the number 3 came back in NASCAR in a black and white sponsorship with Austin Dillon, the grandson of Richard Childress, driving it. And a lot of the Dale Earnhardt Sr. fans became Austin Dillon fans because they related to that number 3. Family is very important in NASCAR. A lot of father, son, brothers. You know, there's one 4-generation family that races in NASCAR, the Petty family. Lee Petty, Richard Petty, Kyle Petty, and the late Adam Petty. The one and only time 4 generations in one family has raced in NASCAR. Every year in NASCAR, some way, shape, or form, there has been a Petty involved. Lee Petty started in 1949 racing, and currently Richard Petty owns 2 teams. Unfortunately, the 4th generation Adam Petty drove one race at Texas Motor Speedway, I believe it was 2000, and then was killed in a practice crash and for the Busch Series Nationwide Series. Some of the father and sons that are in the Hall of Fame, we have Lee and Richard Petty are in the Hall of Fame, and Richard's brother Moise Petty is in the Hall of Fame. Moises. Ned and Dale Jarrett are in the Hall of Fame, and then the founder of NASCAR, Bill France Sr. and his son Bill Jr. and Bill's son Brian France currently runs NASCAR. NASCAR has 4 crown jewel events each year. The Daytona 500, which will be February 22nd. Coca-Cola 600, which is always Memorial Day weekend in Charlotte, North Carolina. The Brickyard 400, which is at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, typically late July, early August. The Southern 500, which is always Labor Day weekend at Darlington, South Carolina. The Daytona Speedway was opened in 1959. It was a 2.5-mile super speedway that was the vision of Bill France Sr. He wanted this, palace racing palace, and Daytona was created. Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte's 600 is the longest race in NASCAR. 600 miles. It's always Memorial Day weekend. It goes from day to night. Starts about 5 o'clock Eastern time, and runs until it's over. The Brickyard 400 began, I want to say it was 94 was the first Brickyard. To Hallow, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where stock cars have never been on this track until then. The Southern 500 is in Darlington, South Carolina, the oldest super speedway in NASCAR, which opened in 1950. It is an egg-shaped oval. If you've never seen it from, the picture of it, or seen it from the air in a picture, it's amazing. It looks like an egg because there's actually a lake that they had to go around in order to make this track. So, most wins in NASCAR history by Richard Petty, the King Richard Petty, 200. The most championship is the King Richard Petty in the late Dale Earnhardt, that's 7. The most poles in NASCAR history, Richard Petty has 123, David Pearson has 113, Jeff Gordon has 77. These three guys are number 1, 2, and 3 in poles. They're 1, 2, and 3 in career race wins. The most starts in NASCAR history was 1,184 by Richard Petty. The most consecutive starts in NASCAR history is 788 by Ricky Rudd, which this year that record will fall if Jeff Gordon is able to start. Tell you the exact number. Let's see, where's it at here? Thought I had it here. I believe he is 17 behind that right now. So 17 or 18 races, if he starts consecutive, which he should, he'll actually surpass Ricky Rudd in the most consecutive starts in NASCAR history. The fastest any NASCAR Winston Cup Sprint Cup car has ever gone was by Bill Elliott at Talladega Superspeedway in Talladega, Alabama in 1987 at 212.809 mile an hour. The most starts in NASCAR history without a victory belongs to J.D. McDuffie, 653. To put that number in perspective, current day, it would take 18 years of racing every single NASCAR race without a victory to tie that mark, which would probably never happen. Most drivers do not even run that long. That is just a small portion of the 65-year history of NASCAR. I just kind of hit so you non-NASCAR fans out there, take a look at that video, see what you think. Obviously, when people are or are not fans of something, you don't typically become a fan overnight. So that is kind of the rough history of NASCAR through the first 65 years. Stay tuned to Robert Sports Show for my top 7 favorite drivers in NASCAR and my top 7 favorite Daytona 500 moments. As always, thanks for watching Robert Sports Show and have a spiffy night.